Good evening, everyone, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Houston and Houston Media Source, I'd like to welcome you to Public Affairs Public Access. My name is Reda Hicks, and I'll be your host for this evening for what I think is a very exciting conversation called In the Running, a conversation on bringing more women into politics. And I have to tell you, I have been looking forward to this conversation for weeks, and I'm thrilled to introduce to you a fantastic panel of ladies, all of whom feel as passionately about the topic as I do, to have a conversation with you tonight about bringing more women into politics. If you have questions for us, you can send them to me at Hicks426, #VoteHugh, or you can call into the show at number 713-807-1794. Let me just take a moment to introduce to you my fantastic panel for this evening. First, State Representative Anna Hernandez, who was elected to represent District 143 in a special election in December 2005. District 143 covers part of Houston, Channelview, Galena Park, and Jacinto City. She's now serving her 5th term for District 143, and she serves on the House Committee on Judiciary and Civil Jurisprudence and House Committee on Pensions. And when she's not serving in the House, she's a practicing attorney at Soto and Hernandez. And when she has free time, which is not a lot, she enjoys spending it with her 3-year-old son. Next to Representative Hernandez, we have Judge Debra Ibarra Mayfield, who was also a practicing attorney for many years in a civil defense firm, practicing all over the state before she was appointed judge of Harris County Civil Court in 2011, reelected to that position in 2012 and 2014, and then appointed to her current position by Governor Abbott in May 2015. And we'll get her to explain the appointment and reelection process a little later in the show, but in her free time, she's very active in the Mexican American Bar Association and the Hispanic Bar Association, and she serves as a mentor in Dress for Success Houston's Women to Women program. Fantastic ladies. Next to Judge Mayfield, I have Roseanne Rodriguez, who wears many hats, but she has served as the Volunteer Grassroots Coordinator for Texans for Marco Rubio, the Political Director for Houston Young Republicans, and was recently named Deputy State Director for the Republican Party of Florida. She's also previously been a Field Director for the Republican Party of Texas, and before she went into politics, she served in the U.S. Army as a combat medic for the 82nd Airborne. Lastly, but certainly not least, I have Catherine McNeil, who is a political consultant and native Houstonian. Catherine's political roots run deep. She started out as a legislative aide for U.S. Representative Margaret Heckler in Massachusetts, and then was a legislative aide for Texas State Rep. Tony Palumbo. But she's worked on a plethora of local campaigns. I couldn't list them all in a short amount of time before I hop into the meat of this conversation, but let's just say she's been in a lot of campaigns, and she's also taught political science courses at local community colleges, and she serves on the boards of Project Row House, Legacy, and Citizens Environmental Coalition. So, hyper impressive. I have to tell you, I'm a little intimidated right now. I want to start by introducing everybody a little bit more to my panel. Obviously, I've given you their credentials, but I want to talk a little bit about sort of how each of these women got into politics as a way to start the conversation. So, Representative Hernandez, you were involved in a special election for your first term. Can you talk to us a little bit about what was the reason for that special election and what that first run for State House was like?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I started my legislative career as an intern through the Texas Legislative Internship Program sponsored by Senator Rodney Ellis. I was a junior at the University of Houston, majoring in political science and psychology, so I took a semester off to do this internship and loved it and stayed on staff for 6.5 years. So I graduated from the University of Houston and took 2 years off from law school because I just wanted to continue working. I really enjoyed it. I worked in the district office and worked at the Capitol during session, so I wanted to work another session before starting law school. And then continued working at the legislature throughout law school. When I graduated in 2004, I thought I was finished with state government. I was no longer going to be a state employee, and went to work at ConocoPhillips because my passion was to travel abroad. So I wanted to work for a big multinational corporation that would give me an opportunity to go abroad. And unfortunately, that year, my predecessor, the late Representative Joe Moreno, passed away in a car accident. And I was asked to run since I had worked for him, the Capitol office, at the district office. I was campaign manager, so I knew the district, I knew the job. And so I didn't even think about it. I was 26 years old, single, didn't have any kids. And so I said, sure, I'll do it. So I took an unpaid leave of absence from work to campaign for 8 months because it was a special election. And my parents thought I was crazy. I said, here, you finally finished, with college and law school, and you've got a good job, and you're going to leave that job to campaign for a job that's going to pay you $600 a month. So I said, yes, that's what I want to do. So there were 6 of us in the race. I got 43% of the vote the first round and was in a runoff and won with 61%, and have been in office ever since. And we'll say it was a challenge starting, straight out of law school, balancing my legislative career, my legal career, personal life, which did not exist at the time. Like I said, I didn't have family, but eventually I married and have a 3-year-old son, and so it's a constant balance. And so I look forward to talking about that more in this conversation.
Well, thank you so much. So, Judge Mayfield, you, in both of your judgeships, first you were appointed, and your second one you had to be reelected. You're recently appointed to your new position in the district court. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that appointment process is like? And then I imagine it's a little bit odd to be a judge and campaigning. So can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, I've served at 2 different levels of the trial court system here in Harris County. And so it was 2 different appointment processes, actually. So my first judgeship, I was judge of a county civil court at law. And when there is a county vacancy, Harris County Commissioners Court appoints to fill those vacancies. So in 2011, my predecessor at County Civil Court at Law number 1 had been promoted up to one of our county commissioners. There was a vacancy there, and they called me to see if I would be interested in filling that vacancy. And as I'm sure we'll talk about, and all my colleagues here at the table can talk about, politics is not something you just fall into. It's something you prepare for and chart a path to. So I had been active in my local party for a very long time, and so when the vacancy came up, my name was brought up, and Commissioners Court called me, and I was appointed by Commissioners Court in 2011. That was an unexpired term, hence the reason why I had to run immediately. So I ran immediately in 2012. Then I had to run for the remainder of my term in 2014. And I had just gotten reelected to a full term when my current court, the 165th District Court, became vacant. And then the governor called me to fill that vacancy. And now I have to run again this year. So that explains why I have been on the ballot now in 2012, 2014, and 2016. It's not meant to be that way for judges. We fill 4-year terms, but because of the way my appointments have fallen, that explains why I've had to run every 2 years for the last several years. So 2 different appointment processes. One thing that was unique about my second appointment when I was appointed by Governor Abbott, I was appointed during the legislative session, and so I had to be confirmed by the Texas Senate. So that was an additional step after the appointment. Then I was confirmed unanimously by the Texas Senate before I could take the oath and become the judge of the 165th District Court. In response briefly to your second question, what's it like running while being a judge? Well, it's interesting because you do wear 2 hats. You wear sort of your hat for your day job, so to speak, that is being a judge and upholding the law and trying cases as a trial judge. Then you've got to really ask every voter in Harris County to rehire you at the same time. So you also have to go on the political trail and ask again and make the case why you're the best person to keep your job as judge. And I really enjoy wearing both hats, and I really enjoy filling both roles. Look forward to talking more about that.
Thank you. So now, Roseanne, you went, and if you'll forgive the metaphor because it is a tired one, but you went from sort of one kind of boots on the ground to another, because you went from serving our country to working really at the grassroots level for your party. So can you talk about what made you decide to make that shift, and what it's like being a woman sort of working in the grassroots level of a political party?
Yeah. when I joined the military, I had a huge, my parents kind of instilled this great love of country. This is the greatest country in the world. It was my honor to go and serve. When I got out, I went to Texas State, and I thought I was going to be a doctor. I was a medic, and I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. It was in 2008. The campaigns were huge, so it was kind of different to go from a very conservative environment in West Texas, where I grew up, and then in the military, and then come out to a college kind of place where it's not as conservative. And I was just I wanted to get involved, and reached out to the college Republican group, started working with those guys, and it was just campaigning is the exact same thing. We are in the military, we are serving our country. Here it's the same thing. We are serving, I feel like I'm out there serving the country on the other side. I want to work to get good people elected into office, to make the right decisions for my family and for those troops that are over there serving. So it was a pretty easy transition to go from serving the country to coming back in a different capacity, not with weapons or I guess, as a medic healing people, but just on the ground and getting people excited about the elections. And especially like veterans. Veterans don't vote in very large numbers, so getting them excited, like you went and fought for the country and our values, like you should be a part of the process here. Like that's just as important as going overseas and serving over there. So that's kind of something that was an easy transition when I came back here.
That's a great perspective. And so now, what is it that you find appealing about working at the grassroots level, working with people? And I know that a lot of it is voter focused, but you were mentioning earlier that you also work a lot on trying to identify young talent to groom for office. So tell me what gets you excited about that.
Well, especially women. So I'm a part of a Maverick Pack group, and it's young professionals under 40 who are just involved politically and raise money to get good people elected. We have this initiative for professional women. There are a lot of professional women who come to the meetings, and we're trying to figure out like how to get them involved. It's just super important. We have women, like I was saying earlier, who are graduating from college at higher rates than the men are, and they're not as represented in office. So I just think it's really important to be out there identifying good candidates like Judge Mayfield, who can run for office for us. So.
Right. So now, Catherine, you have worked on so many different kinds of campaigns for men and for women. I would be very interested to hear what keeps you coming back, and have you seen any changes that give you hope about sort of where this conversation is going and where we hope women in politics are going?
To answer the last part of your question, no, I have not. I keep coming back because the issues are so important and they're fascinating. And whether or not your garbage gets picked up, or whether you have access to health care or metro dollars, there's all sorts of issues that impact us daily and at all levels of government. And I just find those all fascinating. And as a woman, they impact me differently than they might a man. So I think it's really important to have a female voice in the mix.
That's great. So I want to sort of zero the panel in on something that Roseanne just mentioned, and that's a point of entry, right? We hear so often when you're having these conversations that when a man is told you should run for office, the answer is, okay, I'll do it. And when a woman is told you should run for office, we think, well, am I qualified? Would I do a good job? Are there things I should be doing first? There's a whole litany of things that we think through that sort of we talk ourselves out of it a little bit. So what I'm curious to hear from you, Representative Hernandez, and from you, Judge Mayfield in particular, is what was it that gave you that nudge to go ahead and seek the offices that you have sought? And was it someone? Was it, sort of something internal? Was it a combination? Is it something that we could replicate? In other words, is there some like nugget that we could take out into our community and say, this is how we're going to nudge more women the right way?
Mm-hmm. I think, Rita, you accidentally honed in on the issue. For women, it has to be a real belief that you can succeed. A belief that you can succeed. And I look back to what has driven me or led me to that belief. I have to credit both of my parents, because my whole life they told me, you can be what you want to be. You absolutely can. And I try to replicate that with my own children who are elementary school age now. I take their faces in my hands every night and I say, both of you can be whatever you want to be. Now, like with any other job, you've got to chart a course to get there. So I had a desire to go into public service. I wanted to go to law school, I wanted to be a lawyer, and then I wanted to be a public servant. So I had to understand what it took to get there and chart a course to get there, like with any other job. I have a heart for mentoring women, and I hire interns for the summer, and when I do have a female intern, I tell them the same thing. And I tell them, you've got to break your life up into 5-year increments. What am I going to be doing these 5 years? What's next? What's next? According to where I eventually want to be. If it's public service, how do I get there? And that's with any job, not just going into politics. I look at my dad, who was a sheet metal mechanic. His goal eventually was to own his own sheet metal shop. So he had to work very hard to learn the trade first, understand what it took to run a business, and then eventually he did have his own business for a while. So with anything else, you have to chart a course to get there, and you have to believe that you can succeed.
Absolutely. We also have lots of interns in the office. I mean, that's the way I started. Like I said, I was born in Mexico, and we were undocumented when I was a child. And my parents have always been very supportive. And it's also that family support that was, crucial to believing that I could do whatever I wanted to do, become anything that I wanted to become. And from a very young age, I had set in my mind that I wanted to be a lawyer. And I have no idea where I got, this thought that I wanted to be a lawyer, because we don't have lawyers in our family. We didn't know any lawyers growing up, but that was in my mind, and I kept working towards that goal. And that's why I was in a rush. I graduated high school at 16 because I knew I needed to go on to college and to law school, and 7 years ahead seemed like an eternity when I was in high school. So I was rushing through, but along the way I met, wonderful individuals that mentored me, that even though I couldn't turn to my family to help guide me through the college application process, through the internship process, I had other mentors that helped me and kind of took me under their wing. And that's why I believe in the internship program, and I host interns every semester and try to keep them engaged and try to keep them involved and promote them and help them and bring them along to different events and expose them to different areas, because it may not be politics, but in politics we touch so many different areas that I say government may not be what you're interested in, but we work with the healthcare profession, we work with engineers, we work with medicine. So it's important, to just expose them to different fields, and I hope to continue to be able to do that. And in my office, we kind of joke because I have mostly female staff.
Good.
Occasionally we have male staff. Right now I have one male staff member, but I like to promote my staff and make sure that we're encouraging and supporting each other.
Okay, so and then Catherine, I want to come back to something that you were saying, because this problem with the dearth of women running for office is kind of systemic, and we see it in some aspects of government actually getting worse. We have an amazing female mayor, and none of her potential successors are women. She was controller, and then when Ron Green turns out, there's not a single controller candidate that was a woman. City council, not very many women even ran, some amazing ones, but not very many. So can you talk to me about what you think the sort of root causes are? Like, what are the things that we can look at and say, this is a problem that can be fixed, so that we can talk about how to fix it?
I think one, it doesn't feel safe to run for office. I don't think it feels safe for men any better than it does for women. But women, I think, first wonder how it's going to impact their family. Is there going to be mud thrown? And will it come back? How does this impact their kid if they're going to school? I think that there's also, women may be in careers that it's not as easy to go spend 6 months in the legislature in Austin and try to commute back and forth. How does that look like? Texas is unique in that setup. It's a little more difficult here. But even a part-time city council job has become full-time. And how do you juggle? And it's not that I think women are less risk averse than men. I just think they approach it differently. And so I think that women may look for a different type of network, which I call kind of a safe, is it a safety factor? How would this impact my career? How does this impact my family? And what is that going to look like when I run? And I don't know that we have good answers for that. All you have to do is look at the presidential race right now.
That's a fair criticism. I'm going to take a break for just 1 second because we have a caller on the phone. Caller, welcome to Public Affairs Public Access. Can you please tell us your name and what's your question?
My name is Noel Brown. I actually just helped and volunteered with a campaign just recently, and so it has piqued my interest. And so my background is not political. And so, but I was just wondering what would be the best avenue or the best first step, considering that's not my background, to get more involved.
I'd work on a campaign. I would go back in and work on a campaign, and I would express to the people that you're working with, whether it's the professionals in the campaign or the candidate, that this is something you may want to do, and how can I learn?
And I always
Go ahead.
I
We have
would
so
advise,
much to say.
Don't make your campaign the first campaign that you're involved
Right.
with. Learn the different aspects of a campaign, whether it's fundraising, the grassroots, because you want to be aware of all of that. You want to know what's going on in your campaign. And the only way you learn it is to just get in there and do it and get involved in someone else's campaign first, learn it, and then be able to run for office.
And I would say if your desire is to be a candidate, you've got to get involved in the political party of your choice at a grassroots level to understand how the party works. And Roseanne can certainly speak to that issue as well. That's what I did. So when there eventually was a vacancy, my name got brought up for it because I had been involved in the party. I had worked in the party. I had done things in the party, held leadership positions in it. So they thought of me for a vacancy when one came up. So if your desire is to eventually run in some capacity for some kind of office, whether it be the legislature, a judgeship, city council, you've got to get involved in your party of choice.
I also think what's really, really important is get involved in your local community. If you make an impact on your community, that's going to, the voters, the people you're going to go back and ask for their vote, that's going to be really, really important. I've seen very successful campaigns come from people who are already involved and known in their community. So that's probably one of the first places, along with being involved at the county party. But I think being a part of the community and making an impact in the community is very important.
Can I just say the other direction to go is to get very involved in an issue and become, if you find an issue that you're passionate about, and then you can work through the community like you were saying. And at least on paper, our local elections are nonpartisan, so the party's not the best way to run for local office. That may be more issue or campaign based.
If I can add one more thing, also finances is important. As a candidate, I mean, if you are really in it to win, then you've got to give it your all. And sometimes that means having to take a leave of absence, not being able to work full time, or it takes a personal financial hit at home because you're not able to, I mean, it's personal funds that you're using for campaigning, or you're not able to work as much and bring in as much for the home. So being able to prepare and set yourself in a position where you are able to take that time and invest those resources when it comes time to run for office.
Great.
Very important.
So do you feel like you've had your question answered?
Well, no, I was just going to say, well, I appreciate you guys because all the information has just been great. I'm just taking it all in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us. So I actually want to circle back just a little bit and talk about a term that we've been throwing around just to make sure the people who are watching at home understand what it means when you're talking about getting involved at the grassroots level. Because lately, all of the spotlight has been on the presidential campaign, and it looks really big and really far away. So we'll start with you, Roseanne. Can you talk about what it means to be involved in a campaign at the grassroots level?
So the grassroots level is like the most intimately involved in the community level. You are making the phone calls. You're the person who's out there making the voter contact, advocating for your candidate, whoever it is, to the individual in your neighborhood. The way we like to do grassroots is specifically within your own neighborhood. If I was to go to somewhere in Lubbock, I guess I'm from there, so I shouldn't use that. If I was to go to Midland and tell somebody in Midland, some random person, to vote, I feel passionate about this guy, you should vote for him. They might listen to me if they agree, but if their next door neighbor came and talked to them about it and got them, kind of on the same page, this is why I believe that you should vote for this guy, they're gonna listen to that person more because it's more a personal connection. So the grassroots really is about building those relationships in the community and getting people out to vote.
And I think this is sort of a timely question here because we are hearing about the presidential race and how do we choose each party's respective nominees. So also grassroots means, getting involved in your party structure. So both parties have their own structure, and the most fundamental basis for that is precinct chair in both parties. So I was a precinct chair, for example, where I lived, and that's where you're kind of the one who helps in your particular precinct and you're part of the community, and you generate and pass on information about who's running for office, and you pass that on to the rest of your street or however big your precinct is, and that's kind of the most fundamental part. And from there, the party structure goes up all the way to the state level and then the national level. So when I think of grassroots, I think of those things, and I also think of getting involved like at a precinct chair or election judge level where you're helping run the elections, and those jobs are important too.
That's great. So I think you brought up a great point, Judge Mayfield, because I don't know that it's always clear all of the varied levels of positions that are available to run. I mean, everyone knows about the president. Everybody knows, I think, about their federal and state House and Senate, but they don't think about, I could run for a school board, or I could run for precinct chair, or I could run for something more local. I could run for my mud board or something like that as a place to start. And I'm wondering why that is, because these are all institutions that are a part of our everyday life. So what do you, this is an open question, but what do you think it is about those positions that just doesn't occur necessarily to women to say, oh, I'm going to run for that?
Well, I think it's just understanding what it takes, really. Maybe this goes into the grooming question too. What does it take if I want to run for school board? What do I have to do? Do I have to raise money? Is it a paid position? How do I get there? Is it a partisan position? So, maybe going over to how do we identify future candidates in our community. But I think it's helpful that, we communicate. If you are interested, for example, in running for school board, how do I get there? How do I generate those finances? How do I put together a grassroots campaign where I can get elected to more local positions like that? So it's a charting, again, a path to get there and believing that you can actually become a candidate and be successful at it.
And I think you have more involvement with those levels of government if you are involved in your PTA, issues that may come up at school and you have to interact with your school board, or if you're involved in a committee at a Chamber of Commerce and there are also issues at different municipalities, whether it be Houston or Pasadena or other municipalities, that's how you start engaging more with those levels of government, and also thinking, well, I can run for that position if I agree or disagree with the board member that's there or the council member, I can run for that position and represent the area.
I think that goes to your point about getting involved in the community, Roseanne, and to your point, Catherine, about getting involved in an issue, because it seems to me like one of those two things tend to be, at least from my perspective, what draws women to an office is either they care a lot about an issue or they care a lot about a community that they don't feel like is getting the attention it should.
Yeah. I think overall, there's voter apathy and education. No one knows about those positions. I mean, just on a general level, men or women, everybody knows the president because there's so much media attention on that. Everybody knows about the local state house and Senate races, but you never see like a contested drag out brawl for school board or something like that, and there are some, but you just don't get they don't get media attention though. Though sometimes they do, and I think it's just educating the voters, like getting them more, like everybody more involved in the process and in voting and civic responsibility and stuff like that. I think it's an overall problem in our society, not necessarily just with women, but just overall with the voter apathy.
And I know on the Democratic side, there are groups like Annie's List that have candidate training, candidate forums that do share that information. I mean, their mission started focusing on Texas House and electing more women to the Texas House, but have now expanded to different levels of government to go out throughout the state and have these forums and kind of give you a campaigning 101 and how you run for office in the different levels of government.
And I know Harris County, the Republican Party has now put together a leadership council. It's actually for young people under 40 to kind of groom them and guide them. Like if you ever want to run for office, or young professionals are accepted into the program, and they're kind of taken through to teach them like this is what it entails to run a campaign, to get financing and stuff like that, to kind of groom them. So I think programs like that on both sides are helpful.
I agree. So sort of a related topic that we hear about a lot is being groomed for office. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what that word even means and what it might look like for a woman to be groomed as opposed to a man being groomed to run for an office. And maybe we'll start with you, Catherine, because you've worked with men and women on the campaign trail. What does that grooming process look like, and how does it differ between men and women?
I think women do wait to be asked, and men don't. They just plunge right in and go forward, and women wait to be asked. So part of that grooming process would be asking them. Asking them to run, and then trying to make sure they've got the tools. One is access to money. 2 is access to daycare if they have kids. 3, a volunteer network that can support them in the campaign. And so money is key for that. So many of the donors in campaigns come from male-specific industries that women, there's not as many women contractors. There's not as many women engineers. So that's very, men have access to that money and women don't. So I think that's part of the grooming, and is what Anna has found that she's trying to do in her office, is taking someone in, and what the senator did for her in his internship program was you show day to day, this is what it's like. This is how you do it. It's not as scary as it looks. I mean, it can be terrifying to go knock on somebody's door, whether you're a candidate or a volunteer, and say, will you please support this person for state representative? And, they can either not answer, slam the door, not like your answers. But I think part of the grooming process is to just get past that fear. And that's if you're a volunteer or a candidate.
And important to get past the fear of asking for money.
Yes,
Very you're all raised, you don't ask people for money, and that is key in a campaign. You have to ask for money. Unless you're independently wealthy, you're going to have to raise money, and you're going to have to call people and ask them for money, which can be difficult sometimes for some candidates.
And rejection's hard.
Yes.
Nobody likes to be rejected. And you get a lot of rejection in campaigns.
Well, that's one of the things you have to be prepared for, that
Right.
not everyone you ask to vote for you is going to say yes. And so that's part of realizing what it takes to be a candidate and preparing for it.
To me, what that sounds like a little bit is what you were saying before, Catherine, about needing a different kind of support network. Because maybe what a woman
different
needs
kind
is
of kitchen
someone,
cabinet?
Yeah, maybe what a woman needs is someone or some people saying, sometimes losing is part of the process. That doesn't mean you shouldn't run again. Because I feel, for me anyway, if I fail at something, I'm much less likely to try doing it again than if my husband fails at something. He's going to try it again. And so I wonder if it's part of that process is having people around you saying, okay, you lost, we'll try again later.
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I think if you look at the slate of candidates, you'll find that a lot of men have run before, and you don't see the women getting back in after they've lost the first time. It's and the way that our system is these days, you almost have to run more than once or twice to get elected. It's funny, I don't know what it is about rejection, but I do think women handle it very differently than men do. So you may need that person. You can call at 11 o'clock after you've been at 3 campaign events and your feelings are hurt and it didn't go well. And you've got to pump yourself up and get up the next morning and do it again. But also as important is to make sure that you understand the issues that you're talking about, because it gives you a confidence. So part of that grooming process is the learning of the issues that you want to tackle, that you want to deal with, and be well versed in them and know how you're going to respond. Because then I think that gives you a whole different level of confidence to go forward.
That's what gave me the confidence to run at 26 when I was the youngest of 6 candidates, because I had been in the legislature as staff for 6.5 years. I knew the job, I knew the issues, and so I felt confident putting myself out there as a candidate, where I know if you don't really know what the office is about, you're not really familiar with the issues, and you're not going to be a confident candidate.
Well, and I will say, and I don't know whether you all will agree with me or not, but every day when I work with a woman candidate, she gets judged on her clothing. Everyone mentions what she's wearing. I never hear that about my men candidate, and that's part of the confidence. If everybody's always picking at you, criticizing you, then that's a whole nother. So we need to be, as women, just figure that out. Just, okay, this is the look, this is to go forward. And but still today, women get judged on that, and men do not. I don't hear anyone talking about what Donald Trump or Marco Rubio's. Well, that's not true. They talked about Rubio's boots.
Right.
But every day I hear about Hillary's hair, or the pantsuit.
I like the pantsuit, by the way. I didn't understand it.
But every day that's still a topic of conversation for her, and no one's talking about Donald Trump's ties.
Yeah, or Chris Christie's weight. If that was a woman, that would have been a topic of discussion.
Absolutely.
So, there's still those things.
Be the butt of every joke, right? Yeah.
Well, I suppose I'm happy I get to hide under a black robe. I'm kidding.
One less thing to worry about. In your day job, though, I mean, you don't campaign in your robe, so you probably deal with some of the same scrutiny when you're out and about asking for votes.
Well, I think it's all about that level of confidence, and just confidence all around, and being prepared for rejection, however it may come, and again, whether it be appearance or because you're this or that, just be prepared to march forward and just be prepared to take it and just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And going back to the grooming question, what does it mean to be groomed? Again, when I have interns during the summer and one of them tells me, and some of them may be watching tonight, I hope they are, I told them about this, but if one of them tells me they want to be a judge someday, I mean, I look for, are they qualified, do they have the talent, and do they have the drive? And if they do, then I give my career path as an example. Well, here's what I did. I go back to the breaking your life up in 5-year increments. This 5 years, I needed to work as hard as I could at the law firm. I needed to set my goal to make partner. And 5 years after that, what did I want to do? I wanted to become a judge, a public servant, at this level, and I kind of help them chart out that path to get there. That's what grooming means to me, is recognizing that talent and that drive in someone else and helping them along the way, giving my path the sort of example, hopefully, to inspire.
And I think also it's women, and not only in politics, but I think in any profession, you also have to talk to young women about family. Mm-hmm. And at what point do they want to have a family, and how are they going to balance everything? And I don't think it's impossible. I mean, I'm able to do it. I have a 3-year-old, but it does take that support network. And for me, I have a tremendous family. I mean, my parents had helped me out a lot and helped me continue to serve in office, but it does take like a village to raise a child. It also takes a village to support an elected official, because anything that you need to be able to have that support group that you can always turn to. Like we have a parade or something, I know I can always turn to my family. I need you there. I need help. Someone that will always be there to help you, because it is possible. It's challenging, but it's not impossible.
It absolutely is possible. And, the good news is, as women, we don't have to choose one or the other anymore. We can do both now. And it is sort of a family affair, because you decide with your support system how am I going to spend my time? How am I going to do it? How are we going to make it work? And that may mean having children now or waiting until later and not having them at all. But that's a family affair you decide together, and you decide how to spend your time. So we don't have to choose one or the other anymore.
But there's still a fear among women that they'll be criticized, that they're not home taking care of their kids, or they're not home at 5 o'clock. There's a criticism of women around kid taking care of that men, I do not find, are criticized for. And that's a whole nother factor of what holds women back from running.
Well, I think younger women, like around in my kind of age group with the young professional women I talk with, they're just holding off and having children until later on in life. That's just kind
Well,
of
that's a
something
decision they
happening,
make. I
right?
guess that's what I was alluding to is, we don't have to choose one or the other. We make conscious choices about how to do it and when to do it.
Yeah.
But they're not mutually exclusive.
Right.
Right.
I agree.
So while we're with you, Roseanne, I want to talk a little bit about the question of access, because we're kind of talking around how to make it work. We know that there are some innate barriers. I want to talk a little bit about those, but I also want to hear from you with some of the initiatives that you're working on, what you see being done that works in tackling some of these issues. Like we're talking about access to network, access to money, these kinds of things.
I think it's just being bold. So they told me, just be bold. Just don't be afraid to ask. One of the best bits of advice that I ever got when I came into the political world was to find a mentor, no matter where you're at. Find somebody that you like something about them that they can mentor you. You find that mentor and just, maybe they don't want to mentor you, right? You're like, well, you have to find somebody who wants to be mutually mentor you. But I have found people and just kind of always picking their brain, always asking them questions. You kind of just have to insert yourself into those, I guess, situations.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get invited to go golf or to happy hour. Well, just show up and you're qualified. As women, we know we're qualified. We deserve to be there. I think it's just our understanding to insert ourselves and be bold and just say, hey, you overhear them talking about it, be like, hey, I'd love to go to that. I'll be there. Where are we going? Or just anything like that. I think just inserting yourself. And that's kind of some of the conversations we were having, especially like with lunches. Like guys feel like they can just call up another guy, just networking reasons. Hey, do you want to go to lunch? Some of us felt kind of intimidated by asking another male to lunch. Like, how is that going to come across? Is it going to come across like I'm asking him to lunch, like not in a professional way? And we're like, you have to get over that. You just say, hey, I want to network, or I want to talk about some things, and invite guys to lunch and go to the happy hours and find those mentors. All the mentors that I have found have all been men, because in this industry it's very difficult. There aren't as many women out there. And I haven't really experienced the barriers. It's sometimes it's a little awkward and it puts me out of my comfort zone, but I think just get out there and do it. Being bold, I think, is probably the one way to get past some of those barriers that we have.
Great. So we actually have someone on the phone. So caller, welcome to Public Affairs Public Access. Please tell us your name and what's your question.
Hi, my name is Roxanne Warner. I just want to say thank you all for being here. It's so great to see a bunch of women around the table encouraging political involvement. My question was really just to see if there were any type of additional resources that were recommended for maybe women who are interested but not quite involved in politics yet, either a book or a website or an organization that was exceptionally kind of helpful in your path to get to where you are.
I suspect there's tons of books. Campaign 101, or I would just go roam some bookshelves if people do that anymore. Or get on the tablet and look at titles. I also would go, because I think the Republican Party and the Democratic Party both have an Annie's List, or a group that does campaign training. And certainly the Democratic National Committee does, the Republican National Committee does, the RCCC, a Republican Congressional Campaign Committee. I would go to any of their websites, and I bet there's information there.
Well, Roxanne, I've got to say that one of the books that I read and I require my interns to read is, I was wondering why it took so long for this book to come up, but Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In talks about all these issues and taking a seat at the table when you walk in a room. Why do we sit on the side? We need to take a seat at the conference room table. How do we identify a mentor? She has a chapter of that in that book. So I found it really helpful for all of these issues that we're talking about today. So I would read that if you haven't, and then pick a good biography of a good woman leader. I mean, I'm reading Margaret Thatcher's right now, and so she's an excellent example. An inspiration to me. So pick your biography of choice and a good historical woman leader.
And I think more for day-to-day, now with social media, if you follow any elected officials, you'll see what their day-to-day is and what activities they're involved in, what they're doing, and you kind of get an idea of what it's like to be in that office. So I would also include social media on that.
And there are also women groups, Republican women groups. I believe there are Democrat women groups. You can kind of go and talk to women who are already involved. They're always very welcoming, and they always have information. And I know they have speakers who come and kind of just speak to the group. It's a good way to get information if you're not politically involved and you just want to kind of get some information. Those are good places to go to.
That's right. Yeah.
And I would just thank you for your question, Roxanne. And I would just add, to circle back to the community points, there are so many great points of intersection between the community groups working in Houston and issues that can get you plugged into the political process. So, the Women's Chamber always hosts an elected officials dinner where you have a chance to meet them and talk to them about issues that you care about. The Greater Houston Partnership has a slate of policy things that they work on. You can get plugged in there. There are a lot of even sort of smaller organizations than that I would suggest are a good place to get plugged in on an issue, which, as Catherine mentioned, is a great way to find your way into the political process too. If you're not quite ready to pick a party or not dip your toe in that water just yet, that's a good way to do it. Which actually circles to the question that kind of was the impetus for this conversation. There's been so much conversation with the elections that we had this past fall and what's going on now here in Houston among sort of that young professional leader set who, we're in a city where our elections are at least nominally nonpartisan. They're community leaders who want to see more women running. And it's not really as much a question of political persuasion per se, because we're talking about potholes and infrastructure and whatnot. So at the city level, it's really more a question of, I get this question a lot. I see, X qualified woman or Y qualified woman, and I really want her to run. And what do I need to do to encourage her, help her, set her up for success? How can we as a community be doing that? Maybe irrespective of party, or even if party is involved, how can we be doing that as a community in Houston?
I think, one, you need to ask. I think you need to start off and ask, are you interested in running for office? And because it goes back to women wait to be asked, and they just don't immediately take that plunge. So I think starting by asking.
And probably, you brought it up earlier, we can find those leaders who are already leaders within their community at the PTAs, at the HOAs, who are kind of involved in their community already, kind of talk to them and say, hey, have you ever been interested in running for elected office? There's a school board position or there's a House rep position open. They already have shown an interest and have some leadership skills. You can just try to bring them in and develop those. I think that'll be a good way.
You have to also, I'm sorry, but part of that also is you have to be able to break into that good old boy system of who's predetermined that they were going to run, or you can't be afraid to say, okay, I'm going to run, and it's okay to run against 6 people.
Mm-hmm. But then putting them in contact with others who can help them. I mean, if it's going to be a race with 6 people, put them in contact with someone who can help them, whether it be a consultant or a finance chair or somebody, that a board of advisors, someone could help that
Absolutely.
candidate you've identified.
Yeah, I think always be looking for candidates, because sometimes the field has already formed by the time we think, oh, we need a female candidate. I mean, there are already 5 men in the field that have already secured endorsements and secured support, and it's too late. So it's always thinking ahead, thinking there's an election coming up in 2 years and 4 years. Right. We need to start thinking now, who would we like to see as a female candidate in that race?
That's right.
Yeah. And I think the men do the same thing. When they announce that this has probably been in the works for 2 years, where they're raising money, getting those endorsements lined up. So it's the same thing. Identify them and then get them to where they are ready to secure all those endorsements before they announce.
That's a good point, because we hear about somebody's going to retire, a judge or a legislator is going to retire in the next term. Then we need to start thinking about who may be good for that slot. That's a good point.
So, and then maybe this is a kind of a on the flip side question, because we've talked a lot about party structure, which I think has actually been very helpful for our viewers at home to understand a little bit about how that works and to get plugged in. But this is the year of the disruptor, and so and some of the conversation here has been around how do you get some of these candidates that haven't been in the pipeline for the last 10 years but would make an excellent choice and perhaps a better choice than someone who has been. How do you? Let me think about how to ask this question well. Do you think that, as a woman trying to be that disruptive candidate, there could be some success with a community behind you rather than having a party behind you?
I think so. I've always believed way more in the community than the party. The party's great, but I believe if you have strong roots and ties within the community, those people are the ones who choose who represents them. So I think that's a stronger network than a party network. That's just because I'm a grassroots person.
Right, and we've seen that in races where a candidate can get all of the endorsements, all the party endorsements, but if they don't have the connection to the community and to the voters, that grassroots person is going to defeat them.
Right, I agree.
The party is not nearly as strong as it used to be as an entity. And it used to be people went to the party to run. You had to kind of get the sign off from the party to run, and now people go and tell the party that they're running. So I think that you don't have to worry about, you can come from any type of community, whether it's a professional community, a neighborhood community, and build a campaign.
I think it's good to have both, where you're real strong in the community, but you go to the party to be able to use their resources, because they're going to have resources that you might not have. But I think having those community ties is going to be very, very useful for you, more so than just party ties.
Just not relying solely on the party.
Right.
Yeah, it's like several circles that overlap. The party support, the community support, the financial support. So you need to work all of those circles.
Yeah. So we're coming towards the end of our hour, and I just kind of want to recap. And I think that this has been an amazing conversation. But I mean, what it's going to take to get more women running, and this is a big conversation that's not going to end at this table. I hope it continues repeatedly over and over again. Everyone at home, go have this conversation. But it's sort of it's access. It's the right kind of network. It's resources, not just money, but also resources to address family concerns, to address the other parts of a woman's life that she's worrying about while she's multitasking a campaign. It's all of those kinds of things, and then the backing of people who will say, you can do it, and if you don't win this time, you should do it again. So I think I would like to go around the table very quickly and just say, if there's one piece of advice you'd give to a woman considering a run this year or 10 years from now, what's the one thing you would encourage her to be doing right now to set herself up for success? And we'll start with you, Representative Hernandez.
I think, too, it's important to have the confidence in herself as a candidate, and whether that be to get more professional experience, to be able to be in a financial position to run for office. And so whatever it takes, as the judge mentioned, that 5-10-year plan on where you want to be and how are you going to get there. How will you be a credible, well-qualified candidate for that position and build to that direction.
Great. Judge Mayfield?
I think it would be finding and identifying a mentor, and maybe more than one, who can help you along the way, help you develop that plan to succeed, encourage you if things don't work out the way you have planned them in that time frame. So finding and identifying someone who help you get to where you want to be.
I would say just being the leader in the community, having really close ties in the community. I think that is probably the most helpful thing that I could, as advice, give to somebody.
I would find your passion. What is your passion? Is it the environment? Is it children's rights? Is it immigrant rights. What is it? The budget? Is it fixing the pension? Is it safety for firefighters or police officers? Find your passion, get involved in it, and because I can promise you at some point public service is going to be a part of solving or taking it to the next level.
I want to thank you ladies so much for spending your Thursday night with me. I have really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's been fantastic. For all of you who've been watching at home, thank you for joining us on Public Affairs Public Access. This will be available via Houston Media Sources YouTube channel and the League of Women Voters of Houston's Vimeo channel in the next couple of days if you'd like to watch it again or share it with your friends. And I'm also going to encourage everyone to keep having this conversation. Obviously, we have some big issues to solve in order to bring women into politics, but together we can do it, especially as a community, and especially as a community as great as Houston. And I also am thrilled to announce that this evening's conversation is part of an entire month of conversation on democracy. March, we've labeled Democracy Month at the League of Women Voters, and so we have a couple of other amazing events coming up. On March 24th, we're joining Sketch City to have a hack night on democracy issues. If you would like more information about that, you can visit Sketch City's website, or you can find them on Facebook. And at the end of the month, we're still working out the details, so keep your eye on League of Women Voters of Houston's Facebook page, but we will be hosting a town hall on the nuts and bolts of running. This will be an event for men and for women on the brass tacks that you've been hearing about tonight. How do you build a base? How do you build a network? That whole money thing, how does that work? All of these questions, we're going to have a couple of amazing panels, and we would love for all of you to join us. So watch our Facebook page for more details about that. On behalf of Houston Media Source and the League of Women Voters of Houston, I'm Reda Hicks. Thank you and have a good night.